aim of this video is to provide you with knowledge of Christopher McCandless, Jon Krakauer, who is the author of Into the Wild, and Sean Penn, who wrote the screenplay and also directed Into the Wild, and also give you a brief context of the world in the 1980s and the 1990s. This knowledge will allow you to have a richer understanding of the film Into the Wild when you view it. Christopher McCandless was born in 1968. He was the first child of Walt and Billy McCandless. Christopher had a younger sister, Corinne. Now, Walt also had 6 children, Christopher's half-siblings, with his first wife, Marcia. After he finished high school in 1986, Christopher went travelling, adventuring, in his faithful old Datsun and discovered that his life was a lie. His father hadn't divorced Marcia, and he and Billy weren't married, which made Christopher and Corinne bastards. After Christopher completed his university degree in 1990, he donated his savings to Oxfam and began the journey that would lead to his death in 1992. Christopher was an accomplished sportsman and honours student. After university, he was likely to get a well-paid job. So what drove him to abandon his comfortable middle-class life? Was it a turbulent relationship with his hypocritical father, who physically assaulted his mother? Or maybe a love of adventure and challenge? Or perhaps a rebellion against society and conformity? Perhaps Christopher was mentally ill. Or perhaps he was just driven by a love of nature and purity. Or maybe an attempt to discover himself. Look, all these different theories are completely valid, and after you've watched the film and also explored some other texts, interviews with his family, and also with the actors and Sean Penn, the director, which will kind of give you an idea and give you a rounded thing. You can make up your own mind. Everything is just theories. During his travels, Chris didn't contact his family at all. He completely distanced himself from his previous life and changed his name to Alexander Supertramp. Chris, or Alex, had incredible adventures and met extraordinary people. However, his constant goal was to get to Alaska. In April 1992, Alex arrived in Alaska and went into the wild. His journal documents 113 days where he survived living off the land. He died sometime in August. A book and film have been made which have turned him into a cult figure, but Chris divides opinions. Was he a hero, or just a foolish, unprepared kid? In 1996, Jon Krakauer published the non-fiction book Into the Wild, which was the story of Christopher McCandless' 2-year journey between 1990 and 1992. Krakauer, who as a young man had spent 3 weeks in Alaska living off the land, identified and empathised with Christopher. There has been speculation that Christopher McCandless was mentally ill. However, this is something that Krakauer seeks to refute in the book. Krakauer believed that Christopher was intense, not crazy.
The heart of what was essential about the story to me was part of all of us, and it was everybody's story. There's a big, shocking, beautiful, dangerous, fulfilling world, and to dive into that swimming pool like that is something we all want to do somehow.
Sean Penn brought Krakauer's book Into the Wild because he liked the cover. That night, he read the book twice and instantly knew that he wanted to turn the book into a film. Penn had to court the McCandless family for 10 years before they agreed to let him make the film. Penn wrote the screenplay and directed the film, which remains largely true to the book. Due to the constraints of film, he does play with time, however. There have also been some criticisms that Penn romanticises Christopher McCandless' character. The film Into the Wild is set between 1990 and 1992. However, Christopher McCandless would have been developing his philosophies in the 80s that were the spur for his journey. In the 80s, many developing nations were experiencing financial and social difficulties and had to apply for financial aid. Ethiopia experienced a widespread famine from the mid-80s into the early 90s. Early in the film, when Christopher donates $24,000 to Oxfam, he attaches a note, "These are all my savings, feed someone with it." In contrast to the developing countries, the 80s and 90s were periods of great prosperity for America. In The Wolf of Wall Street, Gordon Gekko sums up the prevailing American attitude of the time when he says,
"The point is, ladies and gentlemen, that greed, for lack of a better word, is good. Greed is right. Greed works. Greed clarifies, cuts through, and captures the essence of the evolutionary spirit. Greed in all of its forms. Greed for life, for money, for love, knowledge, has marked the upward surge of mankind, and greed, you mark my words, will not only save Teldar Paper, but that other malfunctioning corporation called the USA.
The 80s and 90s were decades when American multinational companies such as Nike, Coca-Cola and Nestle were running sweatshops in developing countries. Essentially, America was profiteering from other countries' poverty. Key points. In 1990, Christopher McCandless gave up a comfortable middle-class life to become a vagabond adventurer. It is unknown what drove Christopher to seek adventure, however there are many theories. Jon Krakauer wrote the non-fiction book Into the Wild. He recognised elements of Christopher's personality in himself. Sean Penn wrote the screenplay and directed the film Into the Wild. The 80s and 90s were a period where many developing countries struggled financially and socially. Christopher donates all his savings to Oxfam so they can feed someone. Ironically, Christopher dies of starvation in 92 after travelling for 2 years.